Hey, what's going on, guys? So in this video we're going to use React to create a wildfire tracker, and we're doing this with the NASA Open API to track natural events. It tracks wildfires, volcanoes, storms, and stuff like that. So we're going to focus on the wildfires and basically be able to plot them on a Google map so you can see everywhere where there's a fire, and most of them are on the west coast of the US. There's a couple down in Brazil. Looks like there's one up in Canada, and each one of these is going to be a component. These are going to be the location marker components, and if we click on it, it's going to open up the location info component, which is just a box with the ID of that particular event and the title. So I can click on any of these and it'll show me the ID and the title. All right, we'll also be creating a little loader, so when we enter the site or the application, we get a little spinner and it fetches the data from NASA. All right, so React hooks, use state, use effect. We're using the Iconify library. We're using a package called Google Map React to create the map and plot points on it. So that's it. Let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so before we start coding, there's just a couple things I want to go over. So this is the NASA Open API website. It's api.nasa.gov. And you can generate an API key, but you actually don't need one if you're just kind of exploring the data, exploring the API. If you were going to do something in production, then you'd want to get an API key and add that to your requests. So down here, you can see all the different APIs that are available, and there's some really cool stuff. There's Mars weather, Mars rover photos, near Earth object web service, so like asteroids and stuff like that. We're going to be dealing with this EONet, which is the Earth Observatory Natural Event Tracker. So if we take a look at this, it says it provides a curated source of continuously updated natural event metadata. So it has things like severe storms and volcanoes and wildfires, and we're just going to narrow it down to wildfires, but you could of course add to this application and use all the data. So if we look at the API documentation, you'll see that we're going to get some events with an ID, title, description, category, and geometries, which is going to include the latitude and longitude, which we can point on the map. So if we click this link, this is the actual data link that we're going to get all of our events from. So we have an object with the service title and description, and then an array of events. And some are wildfires. You can see the category ID 8 is wildfire. This is another one. And then this one is a severe storm, tropical storm Polo. And these geometries arrays have objects with the date, the type, and the coordinates. Now, storms have multiple coordinates because it's just like the storm path. It has a date and a time, and then it has its path that it's moving along. So you can actually create some really cool interfaces with this. Now, as far as the map, we're going to use a package called Google Map React, which is pretty easy to use. We just pass in, the center, the zoom value, and then we can add any kind of component we want into the map, a marker or whatever. And we do need to add an API key here in terms of Google Maps. So I have my Google Cloud Console open here, and I have my credentials. I already have an API key, so you definitely want to create that in your Google Console. So if I click edit here or view, you'll see that I'm going to use this API key, and I'm going to change this after the video, so don't use that one. And then we're also going to use Iconify for our icons because we want to place the little fire icon wherever there's a wildfire. All right, and we'll be using the React package for that as well. So enough talk, let's jump into VS Code. And we're just going to start from absolute scratch here. So let's create a new React app. So we'll use npx create-react-app, and I'm going to create it in this current directory, which I just called Wildfire Tracker. Okay, so now we have all of our files and folders. So let's clear this up and let's install our dependencies. So npm install, and the first package we want is google-map-react. And then for Iconify, we have two packages. One is going to be Iconify or at Iconify/React, and then at Iconify/icons-mdi. We're using the material design icons. Okay, so now that those are installed, we'll go ahead and run npm start up our dev server. And we should just get the standard React page. Now I just want to do a little bit of cleanup. So in public, in the index HTML, I'm going to change the title here So let's change that to Wildfire Tracker. And then in the source folder, I'm going to get rid of some of these files: setup test, app.test, app CSS, and logo SVG. We're just going to scrap those files. And in app.js, we don't need to import the logo or app CSS. We no longer need to import React into components anymore, which is nice. We're going to get rid of the header, so everything in the div here. And for now, let's just do h1. Actually, let me just set this to React. And then let's just have an h1 here and just say welcome to the app. And I'm going to get rid of this class name here as well. All right, so if I save that, we should be able to, so we just get welcome to the app. All right, so first thing I want to do in terms of components is the map component. So in the source folder, let's create another folder called components. And inside there, I'm going to create a file called map.js. And I'm going to use I have the ES7 React Redux snippets extension. So if we use RAFCE, that'll generate an arrow component for us, or arrow function component. And in here, we don't need to bring in React anymore. What I do want to bring in, though, is Google Map React. And we want to bring that in from Google Map React. And this is going to take in some props. I'm going to destructure. We want the center point for the map and the zoom level. And let's give this div a class name of map. And then inside here, we want to just embed the Google Map React like that. And this is going to take in some props. So I'm going to put this on a separate line in here. And the first one is bootstrap URL keys. So we want to do double curly braces here. We're going to have an object with a key value. And this is your Google API key. So this here, I'm just going to grab that. And let's go ahead and paste that in. Now you probably want to put this either like at least in a .env file or on a server somewhere. You probably shouldn't stick it right in here, but this isn't a production app, so I'm just going to put it in there for now. And then for the default center value, that's going to be the center prop, and we have default zoom. We're going to set that to zoom. Now you can pass these values in here, but I want to set some default props for those. So let's say map.default props, and we're going to set center to an object with a lat value. So this is the latitude, and we're going to use just a place in California, or maybe it's Oregon. So 42.3265 is the latitude. Longitude is negative 122.8756. And then we want a zoom value. So after center, let's say zoom, which I'm going to set it to level 6. Okay, and those will get passed in here. So I'm going to save this and bring it into my app.js. So up here, let's say import map from, and that's in the components folder, and then map, and then we'll just get rid of this h1 altogether and put in our map component. So if we go back to our application, it's going to be blank because we need to apply a width and a height to our map. So in the index CSS, let's see, I'm just going to get rid of that and that. I will set the font family, though. I'm going to set it to Arial. And then for the map class, let's set the width. Now you can set this to however big or small you want. I want it to take up the entire page, so I'm going to do 100 viewport widths. And for our height, we'll do 100 viewport heights. I'm also going to position it relative because we want to position the info box when we create it is going to be positioned absolute. So now if we take a look, we have our map at level 6. I can zoom out, zoom in. Now to plot something on the map, and we can put whatever we want. Any component we create, we can put on the map anywhere we want. So let's go to our components folder and create a new file, and we're going to call this location marker.js. And our location marker is basically just going to be an icon. So let's generate a component first, and then let's bring in up here. We want to bring in icon, and that's going to be from at iconify/react, and then we want to import the specific icon I'm going to call location icon, and that's going to be from at iconify/icons-mdi, and then we can get the specific icon we want. You can see we even have a drop down here. I'm going to use the fire alert icon. It kind of seems to make sense. And then let's see, as props here, we don't actually need to do anything with the latitude and longitude. It'll just happen automatically with the Google Map React component. But I'm going to pass in here as props lat, longe, and also on click, because we're going to be able to click on the location marker and be able to show a box with the info. So in here, let's say div class name, and we'll set that to location marker, and for the on click, I'm going to set that to a prop called onClick, and we'll have a function for that later on in the map.js. And then in here, we just want to display the icon with an icon prop, which is going to be the location icon. And then I'm also just going to add a class to this, and we'll call this location-icon. All right, and that's it for the location marker. So now we want to bring that in to our map.js. So we're going to import location marker from /location marker, and we're going to put that right in the middle here of the Google Map React. So location marker, and we're going to pass in latitude. Now I'm just going to use for now the center. So we have the center prop.lat, which is just going to be this. Later on, we're going to have a bunch of location markers for each fire, but for now, I just want to get something plot on the map. So let's say longitude will be center.lng. So if we save that and we go back to our map, it's very, very small, but you can see, yeah, I think I put it in Medford, Oregon. You can see the little fire icon. Now, that's obviously way too small, so what we'll do is jump into our index CSS, and let's style location-icon. Give it a font size of, let's do 2 rem, and I'm going to make the color of that, let's make it red. So now if we take a look, there we go. So now we're able to plot these little location markers, or these icons, onto our page. Now obviously we need to use the data, so this data that we get from NASA, we want to get these events and get these coordinates for each wildfire and plot those. So let's go into app.js and let's start to work with our API using fetch. You could use Axios if you want to. I'm just going to keep it simple. So let's say import here, and we want to import useState because we will be adding the events as a piece of state. So useState and then useEffect, because that's where we want to call our request. And that's going to be from React. Okay, and then let's go into our app component and say const. We're going to have a piece of state called event data and a function called set event data to set that piece of state. We're going to use useState, and the default value for this will be an empty array. Okay, another thing we want is a loading value, which will be set to false by default. And this is going to be set loading, and the state will be called loading. All right, now where we want to make this call is in our useEffect. So right here, let's say useEffect, and that takes in an arrow function. So I'm going to be using a sync await, with the fetch API, so we actually have to create a separate function here. I'm going to call it get, or we'll call it fetch events. And actually we're going to set that to an arrow, and we need to mark this as an asynchronous function so that we can use async await. And very first thing I want to do is set loading to true, because we're loading, we're fetching the data. And then let's say const res, so our response, we want to await a fetch request to, let's get the URL here, to this URL, grab that, and that's going to go right in there. And res.json is going to give us the data, so we want to put that in a variable. I'm actually going to destructure from it, and we need to await that because that returns a promise. Now what this will give us is all this data here, and I'm not really interested in this stuff like the title of the service or whatever. I just want the events array. That's all I want. So I'm going to pull that out using destructuring. Okay, so we get our events, and then we want to set our event data, so this piece of state, so set event data, and we want to set it to events. All right, and then finally we want to set loading back to false, because we're done loading, we're done fetching. And then we want to call fetch events, so still within the use effect, let's go under the function here and call fetch events. And then we want to make sure we add our dependency array here as a second argument. So pass in our dependency array, which is going to be empty. So if we save that, that should make the request. In fact, after we call this, we'll just console log events, or not events, event data. And if we go back here and open up our console, you can see we have an array here with all of our events, which have ID, title, categories, geometries is an array with the coordinates. So we have to dig down into this data and get the latitude and longitude for each one, and then display a marker for each one. All right, so we'll get rid of that. Now I do want to have some type of loader when it's fetching the data, so what I'm going to do is put in an expression here and say, if not loading, then we want to show the map component. We want to pass in our event data as a prop. So pass in our event data, and then let's have an else here. And I want to have an actual loader. We could just put in like an H1 and say loading, and then if we go back here, if I reload, you'll see loading. But I have a spinner that I want to use, and I want to create a loader component. So let me bring that image in. So it's just a GIF. I'm just going to bring it right into my components folder here, spinner.gif, or GIF if you're a psychopath. And then let's bring in loader. I know we haven't created it yet, but we'll create a component called loader. And then down here, instead of an H1, let's say loader, and we'll create our component real quick, loader.js, and we'll go ahead and just generate a component. And we don't need to import React. I'm going to import this spinner graphic though, so let's say import spinner from /spinner.gif. And as far as what we want to return here, it's going to be, let's say, class name loader. And then in here, we just want to have an image. We just want to display the spinner, so it'll be an image. And the source is going to be the spinner that we brought in, and then alt, we'll just do loading. And then under that image, I'm going to put an H1 and just say fetching, we'll say fetching data, I guess. Okay, so if we go back here and I reload, that doesn't look very good. So I think we should just add a little bit of styling. So in our index CSS, let's go down to the bottom here and style the loader. So I'm going to display flex, and we want them to go vertical, not horizontal. So flex direction will be a column. So the heading and the spinner are on top of each other. We want to align everything to the center. So align items, justify content to the center, set a min height of 100 viewport heights. And then I also want to make the image a little bigger. So let's say loader image, and we'll set the width of that to 400 pixels. And then for the H1, I just want to move that up a little bit. So I'm going to set the margin dash top to -100 pixels. All right, so if we take a look at it now, that looks much better. All right, so that has nothing to do with the map or anything, but I think it's just a nice touch. So now close up loader, we don't need that anymore. I don't think we need location marker anymore. We can close that up. So now we want to deal with the event data that's being passed in to our map. So now map.js is we're gonna pull out event data from the props, and we now have access to that array. So we have to figure out how we're gonna, display this here. So I'm gonna put instead of having just a single location marker, we're going to want to loop through or map through the event data and put out a location marker for each one. So up here, let's say const markers, and let's set that to the event data that's being passed in. We want to map through it. We'll say for each one, we'll call it EV. And for each event, I want to first check and make sure it's a wildfire. So if we look at the data again, each object has a categories array with a single object, a single item with an ID, and ID 8 is wildfires. If we go down here, you'll see ID 10 is severe storms. And you could, of course, add on to this application afterwards if you want, but I'm going to check to see if the event.categories, now categories is an array with one item, so I want the first item, and I want to check the ID and see if it's equal to 8. Okay, and then after that if, we'll just return null. Okay, and then in here, what we want to do is return this, a location marker. So I'm just going to cut that, and we're going to return that, except we're not going to use center lat. We're going to use ev dot, and remember there's this geometries. Let's check it out. So this geometries array with a coordinates array, and it seems that all the wildfires only have a single object in the geometries array. Notice the storm has more, because I guess it's like following where the storm goes. So if you're plotting storms, you're just going to want to loop through geometries, but since there's only one, we'll just use the first index. So let's go ahead and say event.geometries, first one, first and only one, dot coordinates, which is also an array, and the second one is the latitude. So this would be 1. 0 is the longitude, 1 is the latitude. So I'm going to copy that, and for the longitude, we'll paste that in. We'll change that to a 0. Okay, and then down here, we just simply want to add in our markers. And if we go back to our app, now we can see all the wildfires, not just around the country, but around the world. If I zoom out, I think, yeah, there's a couple down here in Brazil. We can zoom in, zoom out. All right, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to be able to click on one of these fires and then have a little box pop up over here with the ID, the specific ID of that wildfire, as well as the title. All right, so let's see. Let's first create the component. So I'm going to have a new file here in components. We're going to call this location info box.js, and we'll go ahead and generate a new component here. And for the location info box, we don't need to bring anything in here. It's going to take in an object with some info, which is going to be the ID and the title. And then let's give this div a class name. We'll set that to location-info. And then in here, we're going to have an h2 and say event location info, and then a UL, an unordered list with a list item. We'll say ID, and let's put in a strong tag here. And inside the strong tag, I'm going to put from the info prop that's passed in, we want the ID. And I'm going to just copy that down, and we're also going to put the title. And we'll change the label here to title. All right, so that's it for the location info box component. So I'm going to go back to map.js, and we want to bring that component in. So let's say import location info box from / location info box. I'm also going to bring in use state from React. So use state, bring that in. All right, and then what we want to do is create a piece of state for our location info. So let's say const, and we'll call this location info, and then set location info to set it. And we need to set that to use state, and we'll pass in null as the default value. And what we want to happen is when we click on this location marker, let's say on click, and when that happens, we're going to have a function and call set location info and pass in an object with an ID set to ev.id, and then the title, which will be set to ev.title. Okay, now once this is set, once the location info is set, we want to display the box, the location info box. So down here, let's put in some curly braces, and we'll say if location info, if that's true, then let's show the location info box component, and we want to pass in as a prop, we want to pass in info and pass in the location info. All right, because when we created our location info box, it's getting passed info, and we're going to display it down here. So now if I go back to my map here and I click on one of these, it's going to actually show up down here, and that looks very ugly. That's not what I want. So we just need to style it so that it shows up as a little box over the map. So let's just reload that, and let's go into our CSS, and we're just going to do a little bit of styling here. So we know that it has a class of location-info, and we're going to position that to be absolute. And let's say from the top, 50 pixels from the top, and from the right, 50 pixels. And the width, we'll do 400 pixels. We'll set a min height of 200 pixels. And then I'm going to add some padding. I'll do 20 pixels. And we can see what this looks like already if we click. So you can see it over here. So obviously we want to add some more styling to it. Let's do a background. So background color, I'm going to use RGBA. So red, green, blue, alpha. Let's do black. So 0, 0, 0, and then 0.6 for the alpha. And let's set a border dash radius. We'll do 10 pixels. Let's set the font size to 18 pixels. And then I also want to style the UL and the LI. So let's say location info and the UL. So I want to take away any bullet points. So list style type is going to be set to none. And I'm also going to remove any padding. And then location info LI. I just want to add padding on the top and bottom. So we'll do 5 pixels top and bottom. All right, so now let's take a look, and we need to change the color of the text. So let's just add color white. All right, and now if we come to the application, it's not going to show the box, but if I come and I click on one of these, it shows the ID and the title. Click on that one, so it's the big hollow fire. This one. All right, so that's pretty much it. I do want to just add a little header. We can do this real quick. So we'll have another component in here called header.js. And let's create a component here called header. And and we will bring in, I do want to bring in the icon. I'm going to use the same icon that I used in, where did I use it? Location marker. So I'm just going to copy this and put that in the header. And we're going to use a header tag here, and we'll give it a class name of header. And let's do an H1 and an icon. Icon prop is going to be location icon. And after the icon in the H1, I'm just going to say Wildfire tracker, and then in parentheses, to make ourselves feel special, we'll say powered by NASA. And then we'll just add this to our app.js. And we'll add that right down here, header. All right, so if we save that and take a look, it doesn't look too good, so we'll just add a little bit of styling, and then we should be all set. So in our CSS, I'm actually going to put this towards the top. So we have a class of header, and let's do padding 10 pixels. Background color, I think fire brick it suits the application. Color, let's do white, and we always want this to show on top. So I'll position it fixed. We'll set it from the top 0, right 0, and left 0. Should make it span all the way across. And then for the H1, so header H1, I'm going to change the font size to 25 pixels and take away any padding and margin, and also text align center. And I also don't want any scroll bars at all, so on the body I'm going to set overflow to hidden. And if we take a look, let's reload there. Okay, so the header is actually behind the map, so what we'll do is just add a z-index value here of 100, and there we go. All right, so now that's always going to be on top. So when we come to the page, we get fetching data, good. We click on this, and we can move this down a little since it's kind of hitting the header. So where we have location info, we'll do top, say top 80 pixels. Move that down a little bit. Good. So that's going to be it. Hopefully this wasn't too long for you guys, and I would encourage you to add on to it. I mean, there's other data, there's storms and volcanoes. Maybe you could add different icons, maybe a search functionality. There's a lot of potential to make this a lot bigger and better. So I would encourage that you do that if you have the time. But that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time.